Gone away. Think about song, we go walking in the meadow, built slowly. Then that you're crossing, you say, I am not saying no man. You can do the job of doing we're wrong. People smile, happy dream, by the fire. It's so bright, and we do.
Okay, there you are there.
Does mine was board on it? You and me.
We can-
Yeah, she tried to get it onto the television, but you can't connect it.
Says that.
Hey.
It's saying we cannot start a video because the host has stopped it. I don't know. I'm not it. We're unmuted, so we might be able to hear. We can hear now anyway.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the MindWise AGM 2023. It's great to see a room full of people and the buzz. A big thank you to our musicians. They have been brilliant. Yeah, definitely some talent there for some of the TV shows in the days ahead. So whether you're a client, a volunteer, a member of staff, a trustee, you're very welcome, and we're delighted that you've come along to join us for our event today. I want to extend a very special welcome to our invited guests, Martin Daly. If you would care to stand so that we can see who you are. You're very welcome. Phil Hughes. Not here yet, okay. Richard Moore is joining us by internet. Leona O'Neill.
Yeah.
You're very welcome. We're going to hear from these guys a little later on, and that'll be the highlight of our event today. As you know, our AGM is in kind of two parts. The first part is the formal business that we have to get through. That only lasts about 40 minutes, so we'll not keep you any longer than we need to. And then the second part is when we'll hear from our guests and get them to answer all the difficult questions that you've been thinking about over the last 6 months. So we're looking forward to hearing from them. So to begin our proceedings today, we need to adopt the minutes of our 2022 AGM. So to do that, I would like someone to propose those and to second those, please. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Denise. You'll be glad to know that there's nothing arising from the minutes, so we can move quickly on to the next item. It's my pleasure now to present MindWise's impact report for 22-23. And by the way, if you want to look at the report and peruse it at your leisure, it's now available on the MindWise website. 22-23 was another exceptional year for MindWise, during which we launched our next 5-year strategy. Our strategy lays out our plans for the years ahead, 2022 to 2027. The targets we set for the first year, 22-23, were ambitious. However, despite the absence of a functioning government, a Northern Ireland executive budget, a healthcare workforce crisis, a cost of living crisis, and the legacy issues of COVID, MindWise continued to go from strength to strength. Most importantly, we continued to support and expand our operations across Northern Ireland. Our housing services directly supported 328 people. Our community services supported 832 people. Our psychological therapies supported 787 people. And our information, advice and advocacy services supported 5,728 people. In addition to that, we delivered educational programs to employers who are committed to creating mentally healthy workplaces. We also delivered mental health resiliency programs to 3,885 children and young people. In short, we supported more people throughout the year than we had planned. And I think that deserves a round of applause to all our staff and volunteers. And we envisage reaching even more people in the years ahead. High quality, community-based mental health services are desperately needed in Northern Ireland. And MindWise continues to be a service provider, an employer, and a partner of choice for most. In support of our work, I would like to take this opportunity in particular to thank the Agnew Group. MindWise has been Agnew's charity partner for nearly 3 years, and without their support, we could not have developed and expanded our work with children and young people. I was in one of their showrooms during the year, and one of the first things you see when you walk in is a great big MindWise poster. So I used that to negotiate a wee bit of discount. Building our children's resiliency remains a primary goal for MindWise and wider society. Yet all too often our children are forgotten. It's interesting that the health budget continues to expend the majority of the mental health budget on adult services, 92% approximately, while children and young people struggle with the remaining 8%, and there appears to be no real drive for change. However, MindWise will continue to push for increased investment in child and adolescent mental health services throughout the lifespan of our strategy and beyond. During the year, we commissioned via the All-Party Working Group on Mental Health an inquiry into the provision of mental health education and early intervention across education settings in Northern Ireland. The report of that work will be launched in 2024, and it is hoped that this will take us a step further in securing the much needed support for our children. I would like to thank our highly valued, dedicated and respected team of staff, volunteers and clients who work together to ensure that everyone who comes in contact with MindWise is supported to live their best lives. I would also like to say a special word of thanks to Tom Hare, our former chair, who retired as a trustee recently, and he left behind a strong and well-organised organisation. I also need to pay tribute to Cecil Kavanagh, OBE, following his recent passing, and extend MindWise's deepest sympathy to his family, and in particular to his sister Joyce. Cecil was an active member and trustee of the National Schizophrenia Fellowship, Rethink, and latterly MindWise. Throughout his life, he remained committed to supporting people experiencing mental health issues to live their best lives. In closing, we have much to be proud of, and yet there remains much more to be done. MindWise is well placed to play its full part in the development of mental health services across Northern Ireland and support people with mental health issues live their best lives. Thank you. I would now like to ask our Director of Finance to present the trustees' reports and financial statements for 22-23. Siobhan.
Trying to leap up on the stage there and look elegant. That didn't really come off, did it really? But thank you, Colin, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Chair, members of MindWise. It's my pleasure to present to you the annual report and financial statements for our organisation for the year ended 31st of March 2023. Full copies of the statements can be obtained on request from our head office. Before I present the report, I'd like to apologise to the members about an error in relation to the submission of this year's accounts to Companies House. Paragraph 87 of those well-thumbed documents that everybody reads, our Articles of Association, which sets out our constitution and how we are managed, states that our accounts should be sent to every member before they're sent to Companies House, and that we normally send them after the AGM to Companies House once they've been sent to our members first. Unfortunately, this year we had a bit of miscommunication and some changes in staff between our audit team, and our accounts were sent to Companies House in early October before our AGM papers were issued. Both myself and the Board of Trustees apologise to the members for this error and assure you that steps have been put in place to ensure that this doesn't happen again. So if we return to the actual financial statements, as Colin has said, our impact report sets out our key achievements during the year. And within our accounts, you'll also find our trustee report. So this sets out a narrative around our many achievements and our plans for the future periods. And if you don't really like looking at numbers and figures, that's where you'll find a lovely narrative and a way to find out about how we use our money to deliver a whole range of services across the organisation and across Northern Ireland. So 22-23 presented a more stable way of being for MindWise, really. The last few years have been quite turbulent for individuals and for organisations. So we've had COVID, Brexit, lack of a Northern Ireland Assembly, cost of living crisis. But I think as an organisation, we've accepted those uncertainties and we've adapted to deal more effectively with them. And that includes how we manage our finances. And that's reflected within the financial statements for that year. So to give you a flavour of the financial performance, I'll highlight some of the key points from our financial statements for the year 22 to 23. So if we move to the next slide, please. Thank you, Ali. So our income for the year grew by 4.9% to 4.5 million compared to the prior year, and that had grown by 2.1%. In particular, we were able to secure additional income within some of our current contracts within housing and particularly within housing, and within the Northern Ireland Appropriate Adult Scheme. 37% of our income related to restricted funds. That's funds that we have conditions attached to them as to how they should be spent. And that was very similar to prior years. The prior year was 36%. And the remainder of income then, at 63%, was unrestricted income. Our income sources were broken down in a very similar way to prior years. The greatest proportion of our income related to housing portfolio at 49%, and the next greatest proportion related to advocacy, and that includes money advice in the Northern Ireland Appropriate Adult Scheme at 25%. Training income remained at 5% of our income, but it grew by 22% compared to the prior year as it recovered further from the COVID years. If we look at the expenditure side, then expenditure increased by 4.5% compared to the prior year, which had increased by 9.3%, which was a big bounce back from COVID. This increase was more in line with our increase in income. Income increased by 4.9%, expenditure increased by 4.5%, so that was very, very much what we'd hoped for. 65% of our expenditure came from unrestricted funds, whilst 35% came from restricted funds. And again, whilst income remains similar, the breakdown in this year was actually slightly different. Our expenditure normally sits around 62 or 63% of unrestricted funds, but in the past year of our accounts, it was actually 65%, and that was planned, didn't just happen. The reason for that increase was because we were expending money from our designated fund, which is an unrestricted fund, and I'll talk a wee bit more about that later in the presentation. The breakdown of our expenditure aligned to our income breakdown, i.e. the biggest proportion of expenditure was in housing at 45%, and then 25% of our expenditure was in advocacy and the Northern Ireland Appropriate Adult Scheme, so very much in line with our income side as well. So the impact on our funds then from that income and expenditure was that we had a deficit of £15,279. We increased our restricted funds by almost 89,000 as we received some funds in advance of expenditure. We reduced our unrestricted funds by 32,000. We'd actually hoped to reduce it further than that as we are rolling out expenditure through our designated fund plan, but we experienced some delays in that due to reduced salary costs as a result of recruitment issues. And as we know, that's facing the whole of the health and social care sector and has been for a period of time. As set out in our prior year accounts, the trustees had developed a plan through the designated fund to expend reserves generated in prior years, particularly in the year 2021, when the charity generated a large surplus as a result of COVID. So whilst the charity expended 221,000 of designated funds in 22-23, as mentioned, this was actually lower than what we'd originally planned for. In the year, the trustees transferred 138,000 from the general fund to the designated fund to meet the full commitments as set out within the designated fund plan. But the board also made two new funding commitments. Firstly, to provide support to the money advice service as its funding model had changed, and secondly, to support digital development and digital inclusion activity moving forward. The designated fund therefore had a balance of 564,000 at the 31st of March 23. The designated fund has been used to transform MindWise to support client engagement, policy development and digital development with enhanced information systems. The trustees will continue to monitor the delivery of the designated fund to ensure the continued investment continues as planned. So in addition to the designated fund, the unrestricted reserves consist of the general fund and the long-term fund. And the general fund sat at £533,000 at year end, and that reflects the amounts that the trustees have set aside to support the financial stability of the charity. The long-term fund sat at £375,000 at year end, and that reflects the reserves that are tied up in buildings at head office and Lurgan. And then the restricted funds balance sat at £164,000 at year end, and that's monies that funders have given us in advance with conditions attached to them. So when we combine our restricted and unrestricted reserves, our total reserves are £1.637 million. Our results show good growth and a strong recovery after the volatility of prior years. We've adapted and we continue to adapt our services and way of working to deal with the range of challenges that we face. And furthermore, we've been able to develop a financial plan which will allow us to improve service delivery through investment in client engagement and digital transformation and digital inclusion. So if we move to the next slide, please. This slide, I think you'll agree, shows an amazing growth of the organisation, shows a very growing and progressive organisation as well. Two key figures jump out. Income has grown by 42% over the past 10 years, and income has grown by 28% over the past 5 years. And that included the COVID impacted years as well. So you can see that's quite significant. And whilst the slide does show the growth in income, what it ultimately, I think, you have to bear in mind, what it ultimately shows is the growing level of activity within the organisation and the growing number of people that we're supporting through that activity across a wide range of services. Anybody who knows me will know this phrase, finance follows activity. I use that phrase all the time, but I think this slide is a perfect example of that. It's not just about growing money, it's about growing services to deliver impact for people's lives on a day-to-day basis. It also demonstrates that funders are happy to continue supporting us to deliver high quality services, and that we are a sustainable organisation that can deal with challenges. I mean, we got through COVID, which was challenging. So both unexpected and expected challenges. We look forward to continuing the delivery of our plans as set out in our current strategy, and we look forward to making a difference to even more people who are in need of our services. Thank you. Before I finish up, I have two more things. Can I firstly invite a proposal to accept the annual report and accounts, please, on the floor? Thank you, Catherine, as Treasurer. Thank you. And would someone like to second them? Thank you, Emma Rose. And finally, if we move to the next slide, I just want to move to the appointment of auditors for the year 23-24. G McG are currently our auditors, and I'd like to nominate that they're appointed as auditors for the year 23-24. And again, would like to invite a proposal for the motion, please. Thank you, Emma Rose. And a seconder, please. Thank you, Chris. That's lovely. Thank you. And I'll pass you back to, I think it might be Colin or Anne, I'm not sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Siobhan. I can't help thinking if you were Chancellor of the Exchequer, we might have had a more positive budget yesterday, but anyway, thank you for your report. At this stage, I just want to pay tribute and to thank the brilliant bunch of people that I work with behind the scenes, our trustees. Most of the trustees have changed since I have been around, but we have a great group of people who bring a load of skills, talent and experiences to the table. And we have a couple of new recruits who will be proposing in just a moment. But I just want to say a big thank you to the Board of Trustees for all the hard work that you put in behind the scenes. Round of applause. Yes, there's a photo up of the late Cecil Kavanagh. I had the privilege of working with Cecil way back in the 1980s. An absolute gentleman. I lost contact with him to one of the AGMs before the lockdowns over COVID, and renewed my acquaintance with him. A lovely man who always had a heart for people who were troubled with mental health issues, and was a lifelong supporter through his association with different mental health charities of seeing those people get the support that they needed to live the best lives that they possibly could. So again, we extend our sympathies to his family and just remember him this morning. Thank you. At this point, our articles of association require us to recognise any trustees who are retiring, but we don't have any on this particular occasion. but I have some names to re-elect and proposals for 2 new trustees. So we're renewing membership of Janet McClinton, Catherine Collery, and Teresa Majuri. And we also welcome to the Board of Trustees Oscar Donnelly and Fiona Rooney. So could I have someone to propose? Thank you, Denise. And second, thank you, Emma Rose. So you're now fully paid up members of the Board of Trustees for a little while longer. Thank you. Can I check with Anne and Jane at this stage? Have there been any questions? No? Okay. And to make my life easier, I hope there's no questions from the floor at this stage. Moving quickly on. Excellent. Brilliant. I just want to pay, again, tribute to everybody who's part of the MindWise family, our clients, our volunteers, our staff, our trustees, businesses that partner with us to make sure that we have the resources to deliver the vast number of services that we do deliver and touch so many lives across the country. So thank you for everyone who's involved in making MindWise the great organisation that it is. That brings us to the end of the formal part of today, and it's with my pleasure to hand over to Anne Doherty, our CEO, to present us with all the good news that she has there. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Colin. I always have to move these down because I think I'm probably the toadiest person in the room. But anyway, you know, it's always an absolute privilege to stand here and try to reflect on and showcase the work that our team have done over this last year. More often than not, people say that MindWise punches above its weight, and even I say that, but sometimes I go, well, what does that actually mean? You know, how do we actually evidence that? And then for the AGM every year, you have to sit and you have to go, right, what did we do last year? You know, how many people did we support? You know, how much did we grow? Did we achieve our key performance indicators and all that kind of stuff? And it's always amazing when you look at it and you just go, you can't do it without everybody, all of the people sitting in this room. Mind you, next year we're going to have more people at the AGM than there are at the main event. That's a big goal, I think, for next year. But anyway, I'll get to that later. So, yeah, an absolute privilege to showcase some of the highlights from last year. So if we just move on to the next slide, please. I'm going to touch on a few things that both Colin and Siobhan have touched on. Maybe that's no bad thing because it means we're all singing from the same page, which is quite good. So we did kickstart the year with the launch of our 5-year strategy. And I suppose for me, the most important thing about that strategy was the development process, the journey that got us to the launch of the strategy. It takes about 18 months for us to develop that up because we want to make sure that it's developed in partnership with all of our key stakeholders and most importantly with our clients. So basically that 18-month process ended up with the launch of the strategy on the 1st of April 2023. And that's going to guide us for the next 5 years, which is, I think, great. You told us what you wanted us to do, and we started to do it last year. Some of the key things that you said that we should be doing is consolidate what we already have. And we know that's not easy in the current climate, right? Mental health services, the absence of funding, you know, the cost of living crisis, recruitment retention issues across the healthcare sector, all those issues that have been touched on before. We also said that you told us that you wanted us to strengthen our client engagement work, and I'm delighted that we've placed an emphasis on the client's voice today for the next really exciting part of today's event. So and it's an absolute privilege to have Leona and to see Phil's with us now, and Marty and Richard to share their their knowledge and expertise with us, and hopefully we can learn from them. Okay, so we also updated, just move on to the next one. Don't know who's clicking. Oh, is there? Do you want me to click it? Okay. So, yes, we also changed our vision. So I think it's become much nicer, fresher. It's what our clients wanted us to say about what we want to achieve as an organisation. We want us all of us, to live our best lives, appreciating the fact that we all have limitations. So it's about recognising that and then coming from a strengths-based approach and trying to drive forward our best lives, whatever that may be for each of us. We added a value, openness and transparency. And as part of that, organisationally, we've been driving forward a speaking out policy and procedure. We're not an organisation that brushes things under the carpet. We want everything on the table, and then we want to do something about it. Keep learning, keep improving, keep driving things forward, both internally and externally. So that's been quite nice work, I think, for all of us, and we're starting to challenge. What was it yesterday? Jane gave an example about me being triggered at a meeting and me going, Jane, I'm triggered by what you're saying, so I need to change that language on it, so it's quite good fun. We established 4 key goals. So the first one, as our sort of primary goal, is always to focus on our clients, to deliver high quality services right across Northern Ireland. And we've done that. We consolidated the 31 services that we started last year with, and by the end of the year we had 32 services. So I think that was great. On that note, I just want to thank our operational team right across the organisation, the frontline staff who are working directly in partnership with our clients. We couldn't achieve what we do without our operational staff. I'm going to touch on volunteers later and clients, so don't think that you're left out. Goal 2, I'm just going to move on, sorry, not clicking now. There we go. A couple of the stats were listed under goal 1 earlier, but in total, our operational team supported 8,000 people. And I think that's just amazing, isn't it? I mean, this is direct service provision right across Northern Ireland, and that's supporting people to achieve their recovery journey, to live their best lives, okay, in the way that they want to be supported, not creating dependencies, okay? So that's what we do. The Northern Ireland Appropriate Health Scheme, I think, is a great example of some of the developments that are happening, or the needs that are happening right across Northern Ireland. Siobhan and Colin both touched on the cost of living crisis, the absence of funding into mental health service provision, and then subsequently the impact on all of us. I think everybody here has probably been affected by the cost of living crisis. But as a result, we've seen a rise in activity in the custody suites in Northern Ireland as well. So our appropriate health scheme had an increased need and delivered services to nearly 4,000 people in the custody suites. Last year, that was about an 8.5% increase on the previous year, and it keeps rising each year. So there's direct correlation between what's happening in wider society to what's happening to us. The Mental Health Money Advice Service secured just over £3 million of unclaimed benefits for people with financial difficulties, no mean feast as well. And the people that engaged in that service, they said, actually, we feel better now, our mental health and wellbeing is better because we've got our finances sorted out, and also we feel better able to manage our finances as a result of the work that they've done in partnership with themselves. So that's just great. Okay. A couple of new services I touched on previously. We're currently working with Macmillan, and that's about supporting the mental health and wellbeing journey of people going through their cancer journey. So that's quite challenging, as you can imagine. And another one is WISE Talking. So that's working with young people aged 12 to 18 through counselling, provision of counselling. And I'm not going to get into the massive waiting list in child and adolescent mental health services camps, but we know it's disastrous there. So we know there's a massive gap for the need for services to meet our young people's needs. And back to what Colin said previously, you know, we need much more investment into early intervention and prevention at a young age. Don't get me wrong, early intervention can span the lifespan, but we need more investment into children and young people services. Okay, goal 2 is mainly split into 2 key thematics. One is education and one is influencing or campaign activities. It was touched on previously by Colin about the children and young people's programmes, and I know we've got great supporters here who are driving that forward. I had can't remember the name, but we had a chat earlier about volunteering with Beyond Bricks and the difference that it's making to young people's lives, which is just brilliant. So these programmes, we do believe, that are being delivered in schools, community groups, and with employers right across Northern Ireland are really making a difference to people's lives, which is just great. So what we want to do is try and create mentally healthy schools, workplaces, and a wider society for Northern Ireland. And some of that drive has, some of that is sort of making us think a lot more about trauma-informed practices, human rights practices as well. That's all bedded into the strategy as well. And you said you wanted us to do that, so we're trying to drive it forward, which is great. Colin touched on the all-party working group on mental health, and MindWise are privileged to be the secretariat for that. We were absolutely delighted last year when our MLAs and their mental health champions as well decided to do the inquiry into mental health education in schools and early intervention. So we're going to launch that report February time, I think, Gareth, next year. We're getting quite excited about it. Have I got this slide up? I'm going to show that wee video, are you?
We know at MindWise there is a growing need to support young people, and one of the worrying facts that we have come across is that 75% of mental illness starts before a young person's 18th birthday, and we want to be able to support those young people. I have seen in real life that mental health affects all of our young people in many different ways, and it is really important for us to provide them with the language and the tools to be able to support themselves. One of the things that I have witnessed with our young people is their want to tell you what's going on, but their lack of words to articulate themselves, their emotional literacy is lacking. They need support with that. They need and want support to be able to tell you what's happening so that they can get the support that they need. And I think that the programs that we do really help our young people articulate themselves and be able to find a way to ask for the help that they've maybe been longing to ask for a while. So the Children and Young People's team work across Northern Ireland in primary schools, secondary schools, grammar schools, in youth groups, CAMS groups, any sort of sports setting, and anywhere that we can find young people who would like some support with their mental health. We have 3 programs. All of the programs that we have are evidence-informed mental health and wellbeing programs. We work with primary schools, and that's in our Beyond Bricks program. We've got secondary schools, which are our Bloom programs, and we've got youth groups, CAMS groups, sports groups that take on our Your Resilience program. Over the pandemic, we faced the real issue of not being able to get into schools. So we had to become smart about how we did that. And like most other people, we used Zoom and Teams and anything else that we could get online that allowed the teachers to continue that training and continue that delivery to their young people through the online support. We know that prevention is better than cure. Evidence has shown this time and time again. It is really important for us to get into the schools, and particularly the primary schools, which is new for us this year, to support those young people with this early preventative work. We want to help our children and young people avoid deterioration in their mental health and illness and equip them with a toolkit that can help them now and into the future. Beyond Bricks was a chance for us to get involved with children in primary schools. It's the first time that we have had direct work with that age group on their own without their families. So Beyond Bricks was a chance to think about what sort of ways is going to get them talking and happy and talking to each other and motivated to actually start working with us. So Lego was the natural go-to because it's a language that everybody speaks, and particularly at that age. We don't need to have fancy words to be able to play with Lego. We can just do it. So Beyond Bricks started with looking at how can we engage our young people and what engagement tool can we use to then generate discussion. Because those discussions are what creates change. And through those discussions and through those conversations with each other, then we start seeing children being able to articulate themselves better and actually notice, what is it that makes me get angry? What is it that makes me get sad? What is it that makes me feel really happy and energized and motivated? What are those things that lead to that, and how do I create that again if I need to?
The girls love it when it's Friday and they see Amy coming, because they know that they're going to have so much fun, and it's a brilliant way for the girls to develop these essential life skills, and the main one in our classroom being teamwork, language and communication, problem solving and conflict resolution. It's a brilliant programme, very creative as I've said, and the children absolutely love it.
Bloom and Your Resilience are programmes for 14 to 18-year-olds. They work in schools and in the community, and it's about building mental health and resilience for our young people. It's about them having an opportunity to discuss with their peers, discuss with their teachers, discuss with the MindWise training associate that would be there as well, things that are going on in their lives, real life situations. We cover topics like exam stress, friendships, bullying, managing time, different topics that they told us were important for them to learn about. The young people are given strategies within the workshops that they can then adapt and make right for them so that they can use them now and into the future. The children and young people's programs are really just getting started. Beyond Bricks is in its first year, and we're seeing great outcomes for our children and for our teachers, which are equally important. And we hope to continue this program across Northern Ireland and possibly even into the UK as well. I'm extremely passionate about what I do. I know the Children and Young People's team is extremely passionate about what we do together. The impact that our program has on the young people has really driven the passion that we have and accelerated the passion that we have to want us to continue it for as long as we can. If you'd like to get in touch with us for more information about any of our programs, you can contact us through the website and we'll be sure to get in touch.
So that's Amy. Amy's here, I think, and had a stand up or whatever. So thank you very much, Amy. And that's just one of the Wise Moves films that was created in the first year of our strategy. And the Wise Moves programme, so inspirational and so successful for the organisation as a whole, that we're investing in it, and the aim is to build it into core, that we do it every year, different thematics, and then we use that information to raise awareness of mental health issues, to support access and funding, to influence and challenge everybody. So really exciting stuff. I'm not going to get into all the challenges because I think they have been touched on: cost of living, absence of the Northern Ireland Executive, all of those lovely things that we're all faced with in society in Northern Ireland. That doesn't seem to change really from one decade to the next, to be perfectly honest. But what I would like to say is that MindWise is continuing to grow from strength to strength. We're doing brilliantly, and we couldn't do it without everybody working together. We're going to consolidate, we're going to keep driving things forward, we're going to become an evidence-based trauma and human rights organisation by 2027. We're going to have grown in financial terms by 37%, and that means that we can reach much more people. The other thing that you told us you want us to do as well is to expand our services right across the island of Ireland. So we're working on that at the minute. So watch this space, and hopefully we'll have more information on that next year. That's me. Just want to thank you all, and I can't wait till the next part of today.
Thank you very much, Anne. Anne is so enthusiastic about what she does. It's infectious, and you never have a conversation with Anne that you come away enthused about helping people with mental health problems and wanting to see services and support developed across the country. This kind of concludes the formal part of the AGM, and it's Colm now handing over to Colm, and Colm is going to come and chair the next section of our event today. So please welcome Colm as he comes along.
Thank you, Colin. Hi, everybody. Firstly, I would like to say it's both an honour and a privilege, to have been asked to co-host MindWise AGM. Just bear with me a second to change the glasses. It's old age for you, I think. Well, that's a bit better. My journey has been a good one with MindWise, starting out as a service user and progressing to become a volunteer. Some of you may be aware of my own story, which was launched as part of MindWise Wise Moves project this time last year. If so, you'll know I have a greater understanding of what service users face on a daily basis, and know that clients are paramount importance to MindWise. Honouring the client and exploring lived experiences are central to the concepts of justice, human rights, trauma-informed practice, ultimately leading to the transformational change needed across society. During this session, we will focus on the power of the voice. On behalf of all of us at MindWise, I am delighted to welcome 4 of today's most inspirational people, namely Leona O'Neill, Richard Moore, Phil Hughes, and Martin Daly. MindWise believe each of you in your own right have challenged and inspired others to have their voice heard. You have given hope to so many who have been excluded from society. You are making a difference to this world. Today, we are lucky to have the opportunity to listen to your stories and advices. We hope to learn from these as MindWise commits to enhancing the voice of the clients throughout the lifespan of our strategy 2022 to 2027 and beyond. Without further ado, I would like to invite our guests to share their thoughts. If Leona could tell her story first, it'd be lovely.
Everybody else was so graceful getting up on that stage, and I was not. Thank you so much. I didn't realise I was going to have to go first, but and how do I work the clicker? I'm going left to right, yes? Left and right. Okay, so this is me, Leona O'Neill. I've blonde hair here, don't be fooled. I've gone back to the dark side here. And I was a journalist covering the ups and downs of this place for around 25 years. I think you're probably thinking, she's not even 25. She must have started when she was 4, but yes, I did. And I saw many things over that time as a reporter, many horrible, terrible, traumatic things. And I used the power of my words to tell the stories of people for whom other things, horrible, horrible things have happened to. And I give a voice to the voiceless. I gave them voices. I put their stories in the likes of the Belfast Telegraph or Al Jazeera or Vice or wherever I was working for. And there's me again, blonde hair, brown hair. We don't which is she? That's just me. So 4 years ago, I witnessed the murder of fellow journalist Leona McKee. And whenever you see someone being murdered, nothing ever really feels light again. And when you witness the very worst side of humanity, the brutality that people can visit upon one another, it's really hard to see the good side, the light side of light again. I didn't know Leona McKee, but our worlds collided on a dark Craigan Street in April 4 years ago, and it was Easter Thursday, just to give a bit of background, Easter Thursday, and there was I was there covering there was potential tension in the area because of a dissident Republican march, and I had covered riots for 20 odd years in my job as a reporter, and there was nothing different about this night. It was just, you go there, you film your stuff, you file your copy, and then you go home. I took videos and I stood up against the wall and I took cover and I filed, I write on my phone, was writing the story on my phone. And I spoke with people on the street, and there were people taking selfies beside burning cars, and there was women standing there with babies on their hips, and none of us knew what the night would bring, and it would bring such horror and death and change so many lives. And I think you all know the rest of that story, what happened. Leona was hit after a dissident Republican gunman fired indiscriminately up the street, and bullets ripped past my head as I ran for cover, and people were screaming and wailing and panicking, and it was just absolute chaos that night. A life was ended, and all our lives would never be the same, and everybody there was impacted on what they saw. It was absolutely horrific. And for me, the next few days were a blur. I didn't know what was happening to me because I wasn't really aware of mental health, mental well-being, how things can impact your brain or your body or anything like that. I remember standing at the Guildhall at a vigil and just being completely numb, and people were crying all around me, and I just couldn't cry. I was standing up with a TV crew where she had fallen the night before, and I was just completely numb. I didn't know what I was doing. I forgot to eat. I couldn't sleep. And at times I felt my mouth was working independently from my brain. I didn't know at all what was happening to me. I didn't realise at the time. I know now, obviously. I remember standing at a funeral numb. I was at work numb. I just trying to sleep, trying to be normal. It just, like many people in Northern Ireland for whom horrible, horrible things have happened to and who have experienced violence, you don't feel normal after something like that. You can't feel normal after something like that. And as well as all that, there was a lot of harassment. I was navigating the trauma. I hope there's no bad language in that. There's not, sorry, I've bleeped it out, thankfully. Well, navigating the trauma of witnessing someone being murdered, I was hounded by conspiracy theorists. They were like vultures. They were trying to use a tragedy to raise money from worldwide tragic events. They made videos saying that Leona's death was a false flag, the drill, the way they do this all the time, that I was an actor, that I was lying, that I was hiding her, that I need to give her back to her family, that I had her murdered somehow as some kind of present for Nancy Pelosi. I was in the Illuminati and I had her murdered for Nancy Pelosi, who I'd interviewed that morning for the Belfast Telegraph. And there were calls for me to be arrested and hunted down, and for my family to be hurt, for me to be hurt. I thought nobody's going to believe this stuff, but they did. And that, on top of the trauma that I had witnessed, it was just compounding one thing after another. And people were talking on social media about how I lied about being there, and I was just trying to further my career. I was an MI5 tout. I would do anything for a story, all these different things. People asking me how my PTSD was and if I'd killed myself yet. And that was people using the power of their words to spread hate and fear and not for good. But there was no escape for that, and it was cruel and it was relentless, and eventually it broke me. I got PTSD. I developed PTSD, and it wasn't like in the Hollywood films where you sometimes see that. I got the version with the night terrors and the anxiety and the hypervigilance, and I was ceaselessly afraid, and I was having constant panic attacks, and I would wake up my poor long-suffering husband there in the middle of the night shouting and screaming, and I only saw the negative side of life. Everything was all of a sudden really, really frightening, and I still didn't know what was going on at this stage. I didn't realise that this was a reaction to trauma. This was a reaction to something awful happening. I just thought everybody meant me harm, and I thought, you're so hyper vigilant. I didn't feel safe in my city. I didn't feel safe in my home. They say that it's good to talk, and it is, and to share your words and to share our experiences. And the thing about journalists is that they tell other people's stories all day long, but putting a focus on themselves, they're a wee bit more uncomfortable about that. We're always told that the story isn't about us, it's about other people. We're just witnesses to this, and I found myself totally unable to talk about what had happened. I thought, firstly, who is going to understand? It's a very unique experience that you have. Who's going to understand what something like that feels like? So I just shut up about it. I was being told to shut up about it by other forces as well. And I thought, who am I to be traumatized by something? I'm not anyone's family. Other people have it worst. I thought mostly and most prominently that I'm a journalist and I don't have a right to be traumatized by anything at all, because that is all part of my job. But other journalists contacted me from all over the world, and they told me of their struggles and the stories that broke them, always in messages and always in hushed conversations, at the side of maybe some events that we were at. They were afraid to speak up because reporters don't talk about such things. We're tough, we're hard-nosed, we're resilient, or so we're told anyway, but we are human beings like everybody in this room. We're human beings who are not equipped to deal with the amount of trauma that we can be exposed to in the job. Despite what people might think on social media, we're not soulless robots that just kind of our vultures keep going for the next story, the next story. And I once thought that being strong meant never showing vulnerability, and because of that mindset in the newsroom, that was kind of what was drummed into me. But now I know that the opposite of that is true. There's nothing braver than saying yes to shine a light on your pain and asking for help, using your words, using our words to ask for help. So I went back to counselling. I went to counselling, I went back to counselling, I went back to counselling again, and healing, as we know, was never linear. And I still couldn't talk. I was doing the talking therapy, but I still couldn't talk very much about what happened that night without crying. So the thought of standing here in front of all you folks it's a bit of a nightmare. It's a nightmare I can live with now at the minute. But the reason I'm standing here talking to you, the reason I did a TED talk about this, the reason I could speak about and vocalise this and try and normalise the conversation about newsroom mental health, because I went to CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy. It works for some people, it doesn't work for others, but that was my thing, that was my kind of key. And medical professionals used their words to help heal me, and I'm so, so grateful for that. But I realised during that whole process that it wasn't just one thing that kind of, sent me over to PTSD. It was a culmination of a lot of things over many years in the newsroom, many tragedies, many terrible stories that I had covered that had built up and remained unprocessed with me. You see, the newsroom is a very macho place. There's no room for weakness. We use language like tough and hard-nosed whenever we're describing our media workers. We expect them to go into the worst situations imaginable, ones revolving around tragedy and hostility, and then miraculously come out completely unscathed and undamaged, like they're somehow superhuman, that they're not capable of normal human reactions. And then we bring them back in the newsrooms and there's no support for them. They're expected just to go on to the next story. It's a grim conveyor belt of doom. And I don't think a lot of people realise that. In the dark of the night, whenever I couldn't sleep, I thought, I am going to use my words to do something. I dealt with words for 25 years, and they were somehow sort of, I couldn't use them anymore. I couldn't speak about this thing, but I still had the written word, and that's where I kind of very much leaned into. And I said, I'm going to change newsrooms. This is not going to be for nothing. I was going to shout about newsroom mental health and make everybody hear the conversation, whether they liked it or not. Sometimes newsrooms are a wee bit, they push back on stuff like this. They don't really like, it's a taboo subject there, and they don't like talking about it. I was going to normalise the language, because some of my journalistic colleagues are living with awful mental health. They're relying on these crutches like alcohol and drugs. They're leaning into dangerous behaviour because they're damaged and there's no help for them. So I knew I had to shine a light on the problem and use my words, my voice, what I had, my experiences for good. And somehow I managed to persuade a whole lot of journalists who don't like talking about themselves to join me in this book. And it was sharing their words to help heal others. And it was breaking trauma in the newsroom. And it was stories from the cold face of journalism, not just people from war zones who've been damaged by things, but people who are kind of covering inquests or courts day in, day out in their hometown, and how that news can be just a brutal barrage of trauma at times. And it's shone a light on us. And people weren't really comfortable on it, but you know, we all know that's how we have to move forward, normalising conversations. But we've had, in the media industry in particular, we've had to hide for so long that, you know, we do struggle with things are damaging to us. So you know that feeling, and this is where I'm trying to sort of tell people that, you know, to get to understand where journalists are coming from. You know that feeling that you get when you read horrific stories, particularly in the last wee while, really horrific stories of children being killed or awful tragedies that befall people, and that raw, gnawing feeling of helplessness that it kind of leaves you with, and particularly over the last wee while when we're looking at Gaza and Israel, and you just can't watch anymore. It's just too much, and you have to switch over. Journalists can't switch over. Journalists can't walk away. Journalists have to stand there. They have to collate the information, stand and record the emotions, listen to the grim details, and often filter it so that the really, really horrible stuff isn't actually reaching the public. They have to stand with the bereaved and the bereft and absorb their pain and take responsibility for telling their story and carry it home with them often, a lot of the times. Imagine doing that several times a week in your home city, or far away in another far away place, away from those people who love you, the soft places, the beautiful places that you can go for comfort, and then coming back to the newsroom where you're told you're not supposed to be impacted by this stuff, you're not supposed to struggle, you're a journalist, you're tough, and if you're not, then get out of the job, you're not up for it. So I think our newsrooms are broken, and I find them toxic and dangerous places. We send our journalists into these worst situations. We have them witness the worst side of humanity, the worst suffering imaginable, and we bring them back and say, you're not getting any help because you don't deserve it. We expect them just to go on to the next story, absorb the next awfulness until their cup overflows, and then they break, as it does a lot of the time. And when I speak about my own mental health, particularly as a journalist, people are like, I get various reactions. Some folks just don't want to talk about it at all, ignore it, push it onto the carpet. No, it doesn't happen here, it doesn't happen in newsrooms. Some, particularly in newsrooms as well, think I've gone soft and not up for the job anymore. Others are no doubt just totally sick of listening to me as well, but I don't really care about their opinions, because in speaking so openly and publicly and using my voice and my words, I literally talk about this everywhere. People tell me that I have given them courage to talk about their struggle. I've taken a hit so many times so that this conversation can be normalised, and it is becoming normalised now across the UK and across the world where I talk about this. Mental health has been spoken about in newsrooms, it's been spoken about in the canteens in newsrooms, it's been spoken about in pubs. And did you see that book that she put out, or whatever, it's starting a conversation. I keep speaking up because if the topic is normalised, people won't feel shame about asking for help. I felt shame asking for help because I was supposed to be tough and hard-nosed, a reporter, and things weren't supposed to impact me. But I'm standing here and sort of saying, and other places that I go as well, saying I feel no shame in being broken. I feel no shame in seeking help or leaning on others until my courage returned, because it takes a strong person to do that, and I am strong. I chose the power to use the power of my words for good, because it's in the tough times that you find yourself as well, and it's in the broken places that the light shines through. That is me.
Thank you, Siobhan, for sharing your story. Very, very nice. We are going now to Richard Moore, and I think it's by Zoom. He's going to say a few words. Oh, that's right.
Alt D, video now.
I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me all right? Hello, are you hearing me okay? I'm not sure if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
All right.
Volume up.
So,
Volume up.
sorry, that's my talking computer in the background there. I'm okay to start then? Yeah. First of all, thanks very much for inviting me along to this event. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. And I just want to acknowledge Leona before I go on. I know Leona, and so it's the first time I've heard your story, Leona, and thank you so much for sharing it. I found it very moving. And I always think, thanks to Lisa McGee, dairy girls are very popular wherever they go now, which is great. So I'm going to share my story. What's interesting, connections in some way between my story and Leona's, is the fact that I grew up in the Craigan estate in Derry here. I lived about 4 streets away from where, sadly, Leora McKee was shot dead that night, and I suppose that whole event put a reflection on an area where I grew up and loved very much, and in many ways it sort of represented the area in a way that the majority of the people probably didn't want to be I'm sure didn't want to be recognized, and but it just shows you the connections between people's experiences in some ways. So I grew up in the Craigan anyway. I was born in 1961, and I remember Derry, I remember Craigan before the conflict ever started. And then I remember the conflict starting around 1968, 69. To me as a young boy there of 8 or 9 years of age, it just seemed to be overnight. One day everything was normal, the next day the place was just like a war zone. I went to the local primary school, and Rosemount Primary School, and beside the primary school was a police station. And in 1972, I was in primary 6, and but by that stage, obviously, the conflict was at its worst. In fact, they would say that 1972 was the most violent year in the history of the Northern Ireland conflict. So at that stage, I was in primary 6. The school was beside a police station. The police station was heavily protected by the British Army because it was located on the edge of the Craigan, which at that time was a no-go area. And so one of these army lookout posts was positioned at the bottom of the school football pitch. So on the 4th of May 1972, I got out of school as normal. I was 10 years old, and me and my friends were having a race along the bottom of the school football pitch, heading towards a gate which would let us out to go home. And as we did so, I was had to pass the British Army lookout post on my right-hand side. I was about 10 feet away from it, and the soldier fired a rubber bullet. The rubber bullet hit me on the bridge of the nose. I lost my right eye, and was permanently blinded in my left eye. So I'm blind now over 50 years. But to be honest with you, I bounced back reasonably quick from the incident. I eventually returned to school, went back into primary 7, then went on to St. Joseph's School there, and done all my exams there. I went to university, got my degree 1983, married in 1984. I have 2 daughters. I done a lot of things after Shot, learned how to play the guitar, and played in bands, and I set up a folk choir that sang at chapel every Saturday night, still doing that 43 years later. And I was compensated by the British for being shot. So with half the money, I bought a house, and the other half, I bought a pub. And then two years later, I bought a second pub. So by the time I was 20 years of age, I owned 2 pubs in the centre of Derry. I'm not sure, probably Leona was in 1 or 2 of them, I would say, or both of them, I should say. But anyway, I bought the pubs, and so when I came out of university, I went straight into my own business there for about 14 years. I was also really interested in football as a boy. I loved playing football. I fancied myself as a footballer, to be honest. And the thing is, these indisputable facts. Well, I think I probably would have been the best footballer to come out of Derry. but and nobody can ever dispute nobody can ever dispute that now. But anyway, I became a director of Daly City Football Club in the mid-90s. In fact, the last time Daly were champions of Ireland was 1997, and I was a director then, and so it was a great experience for me. But anyway, why am I telling you all of that? Like, obviously, what happened to me was a very traumatic experience for me and for my family, particularly my mommy and daddy, who were, you know, my parents were two people that didn't support violence in any way. They were two very devout Catholics, went to mass every day of their lives, trying to raise a family, a big family in the Craigan. There were 12 of us. I was the second youngest, trying to raise them to the best of their ability, trying to keep, you know, them out of harm's way and all that. You know, my mommy's brother was shot dead on Bloody Sunday. I was in January 72. Then I was blinded in May 72 in a school playground. And, you know, they must have wondered, you know, could it get any worse? So why is it that somebody like me have lost his eyesight literally overnight, bounced back the way that I did? And I very deliberately tell you about, you know, all the things I've done, not to be boastful or not to try to impress or anything. I do it because I attempt to acknowledge the things in my life that made it possible for me not only to survive being shot and blinded, but they actually see blindness as a positive experience. And I say that with all the respect of people out there who have a variety of disabilities and other challenges that maybe are struggling with that. But I have to be honest with you and say that blindness has been a positive experience for me. I don't really miss my eyesight. And why is that? I think it's because I come from a good family. My parents, my brothers and sisters were the people that caught me when I fell, really. The other thing is I come from a good community. You know, the people of Mullen Gardens, Craigan, the clergy, the teachers at school, my friends in the classroom, my friends in the street, and so on and so on. They all supported me and my family. So back in the 70s, you know, there were no such thing, I believe, as trauma counselors or therapists. If they were, I didn't know about them. And the people that provided all that support was the local community. So I can never over-exaggerate the role that the community played in my life and my ability to bounce back the way that it did. The other thing is, you know, I was able to go back to school and get an education for myself, even as a blind person. You know, despite the poverty, despite the conflict going on around our ears, I was able to go and get an education and make a life for myself. But I suppose that's all part of that support. You know, and eventually, you know, I sold out the pubs and I set up an organization called Children in Crossfire. And that's going now 27 years since 1996. Today we work in Tanzania and Ethiopia, and we provide access to early childhood education for children, basically. You know, we support local organizations to provide better early childhood education and that sort of thing. Build classrooms, do nutrition programs, water programs, train teachers, all that sort of stuff across Tanzania and Ethiopia. You know, and I think that it's important to acknowledge the suffering that my incident had, as I mentioned already, on the wider family. My mommy and my daddy, as I say, suffered enormously. They found it very difficult to cope with my blindness. Every day they looked at me, and they looked at me in the house, grappling my way around the house, tripping over a shoe in the middle of the floor, walking under a half-open door, trying to find my way up and down steps at the front door and stuff like that. And it literally broke their heart watching me every day do that. But another thing that I acknowledge about my story is from the moment almost, and Leona, I'm going to nod a compliment to people like yourself, journalists and stuff, because from the moment I was shot, almost a month after I was shot, I was telling my story. I was telling my story to journalists from all over the world. You know, when I lost my sight right away, you know, it created an interest. There are not too many 10-year-old boys in Northern Ireland who were blinded. So there was media coming from every country in the world, TV, radio, television, you know, newspapers, magazines, whatever. And they were coming in their droves to interview me. So from a very early age, I was actually telling my story. And I think when I look back on that actually helped me. I was talking about the incident. I was talking about how I felt. I was talking about my blindness. And I suppose in my early 20s, I began to kind of acknowledge the fact that there's all sorts of factors that have contributed towards my ability to be content with blindness and to adjust to blindness. And, you know, I kind of joke sometimes, and it is a joke, and please see it as a joke, that I would say, you know, if you're a 10-year-old boy from a nationalist area in Derry and you're meant to lose your eyesight, there's no better way to lose it than being shot by the Brits. Because overnight you become a hero, very popular. And that's the point I'm trying to get to. I was very popular with my friends, very popular with the media, you know, people like John Hughes, Bishop Daly, all them, the local mayor, all calling to my house to see me. And then within a few months of being shot, I was flown to America to see an eye specialist, to see if they could restore my eyesight, and everything associated with me going out to America. I felt like a superstar. Now, I'm not making light of it. This is a funny story in a way, but I'm not making light of it. All that helped me, I believe. By the time I got to the stage where the media stopped coming, the politicians stopped calling, the journey to America didn't happen, I was adjusted to blindness. And then you were down to the hardcore of living as a blind person. And so me telling my story was a massive help. The other thing is, and Leona, you alluded to it too, is help. You know, I need help every day of my life. You know, if I went down to town there before I come on here to get myself a sandwich, and I went down with a colleague who had to walk me down and walk me back. And throughout my whole life in school or wherever it was, I received help. And you know what? I absolutely love it. And people think that receiving help or asking for help is a weakness. I think the complete opposite. It is a massive strength. You know, I get the bus to Belfast. I was on the train yesterday to Belfast. And, you know, I travel on my own. And I remember one time sitting on the bus going to Belfast, and I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around, it was this woman. And she says to me, I think her name was Joanne, although I can't remember. She said to me, look, I just want you to know I'm sitting behind you. And if you need any help, just let me know. And then when the bus pulled in Belfast, she said to me, are you okay getting off the bus? And I says, no, I'm going to get a taxi. And she took me out to get the taxi. Now, I always say one of the great things about blindness is you experience people in a different way. Maybe you don't need that help that I do coming off the bus in Belfast. But that physical contact, that offer of help to me is just fantastic. So don't be afraid to offer help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And don't be afraid to accept help when it's being offered. I'll stop there now, and I'll hand it over to the next speaker. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Richard. That was lovely. The next guest speaker is Phil. Yeah.
Audio settings button, mute, currently unmuted.
Oh, Phil and Martin are a double act. Yeah, a bit like the two C's here. Go on ahead.
And thank you very much for inviting us to share our story. And we're here as a double act. I'm Phil Hughes. I work currently with the department on the mental health strategy and the regional mental health service. I've over 40 years as a mental health social worker, starting my social work career back in 1980. So I've experience of lots of different transitions and changes in terms of how society and organisations deal with mental health. But also I can see the positive bits in terms of how we've got better at doing the things that we've always tried to do and thought that we did well 10 and 15 years ago, but soon realised that we actually didn't get it right. Martin.
Hi, Dan. I'm Martin Daly. I'm a service user consultant within the Belfast Trust. And what that basically is where I now sit within what would be the senior management team and actually try to empower them and to take on and listen to the service user and carer voice, which is really, really important to ensure that any services that we're bringing forward will be for the service user and the carer. And sometimes we do forget about the carer's voice, but I think we need to remember the whole way through this, there is, when we talk about services, that carer voice is a 24-hour service all the time that needs to think and help and support people all the time. And what we're going to do here today is I'm just going to give you a small, how my journey has led to where we're actually going to be talking about a small bit about the mental health strategy. As I said, I'm Martin Daly, just like Richard, 1961. I was born 1961, so we're baby boom. Through that kind of stage, I lived within West Belfast. My life was pretty decent. We got on. My mother died in 1971, so from even there, the likes of social services being involved, I didn't like them. I didn't have nothing to do with them. I hated them because I always thought they were there to take away my children and my family, my brothers, my sisters, where we need to be. But we moved on, we stuck together, but through those kind of stages, I went on into martial arts, where I started to learn martial arts, and I felt I was very strong. I felt I was mentally strong. I thought I was mentally focused. But what I didn't realise that I wasn't looking after my mental well-being. And I've seen that do later on. So when we talk about mental focus, it's completely different from your mental well-being. So growing up, I got married at 18. We had 4 children by the time we were in our early 20s. I have a diagnosis of obsessional compulsive disorder, so I don't know, within that small span, that must have been my obsessional behaviour. But we had the 4 children, so by the time I started to recognise what was happening to me, I didn't recognise things were happening to me where I started to hear things and started to have thoughts and really intrusive thoughts, and I didn't know what they were, and I couldn't talk about them because I didn't know what they were myself. How can you talk about something you don't know what it is yourself? So I lived with it. I carried on. I had my own martial art clubs. I was going through my HGV. I was doing doors in the clubs, and I was also going on to be a driving instructor. But on the morning that my life changed, I was moving house. So I was moving out of Davis Flats into a house, garden. Kids were going to be great. I thought this was the bee's knees, and all of a sudden, this exploded what I had been living with the last number of years. So in that small space of time, because I don't believe my diagnosis, and we'll have a word about it in a couple of seconds, I believe it does come from a spiritual part. I went and talked to a priest, and I told him what it was, and he says, Marty, leave it with me. I'll give you a wee shout later on. So I carried on moving house, because to me, that was my days. That's how I lived. There's nothing different about today. I was just moving house. It was going to be a life-changing day. But I started moving house, and then when I came down to the van, there was a lady there, and she says, Father such and such wants to speak to you. And whoever spoke to me says, I want you to come and talk to the doctor. And I go, doctor, why would I want to talk to the doctor? I went to you, you're on to the big man up the stairs. Why would I be going to the doctor? You know what I mean? So through respect, I went over to the doctor, had a word with him, and the next thing I heard was social worker. Now, it was an approved social worker, but a social worker, and I had through conversation with him, they turned around and said, I want to have a word with him. And within 40 minutes of that conversation, I was detained under the mental health order. I turned around and said, no, I'm going up to move house, because as I said, my life, that was my normal life. It was abnormal for them, but it was my normal life. But no, I was a danger of myself and danger of the others, and I couldn't leave the room. And okay, West Belfast was a bit of a traumatized, but again, when you're waiting for a removal van and jeeps turn up to take you out of the house, it's a bit different. Okay, so I decided to stay with him, ended up being brought up into hospital and into what used to be Hartisburn. I went to Knockbracken, which became 4-star, but it was Portisburn. And I was brought up to and do get the gates. There's no gate. There was no gates where I wasn't gone. So there's no gates. You just went through there. But in my mind, I was a loser. I was no good to anyone. I let my family down. I let my children down. And all I could think about was, no disrespectful, there was a social worker knocking about. And I had promised that I wouldn't let social workers near. So that was the emotional impact that was happening to me. That was the thing that was ripping me apart from all the voices that was going on. I don't give it voices, I don't give it names, it's interference, because what it has done is it's interfered with my life all my days. So it be's here with me, it's up here now wanting to say what it wants to say, but this is my space. So we went up there, I was in and out of hospital for a large number of years, detained under the mental health order a number of times, ECT, medication, all those kind of things that comes along with this journey. At that stage, I felt I was isolated from my community. For someone who felt they were always part of something, my community didn't. It was like when someone dies, they walk the other side of the street because they don't know what to say. That's the way my life became. And it was no disrespect, they just didn't know. So I felt I wasn't part of the community. My children started getting slagged in the street, all those kind of things that I thought I was keeping them safe, but not having the discussion with them was actually having a bigger impact. Not telling them what was happening was having the impact on their life. So when we think we're doing the right thing, sometimes we need to talk to each other to turn around and say, is this or is this not? And if we need support to do that, and like what you're talking, we need to get the support that we need to be doing. So that went on. And then the change of what kind of happened through there, getting out of hospital under Section 75, that we decided they need to have service user care involvement within our services. And I was asked to be part of a service user group called LAMP within Belfast, was Life After Mental Health Problems. And that's when I felt that things started to change for me. I started to be with people who knew what I was going to do, who understood what I was going to do. Because when I spoke to the doctor and I turned around and says, I don't believe I have paranoid schizophrenia, no one said to him, you're delusional, thinking he has paranoid schizophrenia. It was me, because I said I don't have it, I was delusional. You know what I mean? So the power base wasn't there. But my education was with my education. My understanding was with my understanding. So through those conversations, for years, we decided, yes, it is, no, it isn't, yes, it isn't. We decided that, put that aside, is this causing issues in your life? And it was. It was destroying my life, all those issues. So we decided we would concentrate on the issues. What issues is this causing? My family has broke up. Because I wasn't able to talk about it, I wasn't able to say things, then your marriage breaks up because you think you're doing the right thing, you need to be away, because in my eyes, I was leaving this world. I wasn't going to be here. So better for people, it's easier to make people hate you than what it is to make them love you. So you actually begin to turn people against you, and you actually begin to push them away. And that's the kind of the road that I went down. But when I got to, as I said, Section 75, around about 1999, the service user group, I met with them. And I don't know how this has happened, because I've just realized that it's happened. The first service user group who was actually beginning to spawn was Mind, Yourself and Daly. So this is a link. Okay, so there's a link there, Mind, Yourself and Daly, Martha McLennan. I went down and seen them, foil advocates, and they started to really see me for who I was, understand me for what I was doing. Didn't see this anymore, just see me. And that conversation started to go, and it was no disrespect to mental health professionals, they didn't see me any different. But when you read someone's notes and you say they've got this, sometimes it's hard to step away from that. I think that's changed over the years because of our service user care involvement. I think it's changed because of the Bamford. I think it's changed because of the mental health strategy we're going to talk about. That is all beginning to change, but still sometimes they still see you as a sick person instead of someone who has this condition, but how do we support them? And what I felt was my peers embraced me. They understood me. They didn't understand maybe my condition, because everyone lives in different parts. You have your own lived experience, but they acknowledged my lived experience and acknowledged my expertise. And I think it's when sometimes you come to talk to an organisation like this, it's like trying to teach your granny to suck eggs. You know what I mean? You turn around and say you're pushing against an open door. But sometimes there's a lot of learning when we begin to have that conversation. Are we in the right space? I still live with this condition. I still have this thing that lives with me. I still have moved on in my life. A lot of the days now I do live, I don't survive. I still have that conversation with myself in the morning. Is this a day that I leave? Or do I give it another day's go? And what I would say to you, when people have those conversations, they turn and say, I need to do something. You don't need to do anything. Just listen to what the person is saying. They have made the choice. They have decided. They have decided what they need to be having a conversation, because I kind of see living this world as an option that I'm in control of. I'm in control of that. So I'll decide it today. And today I've decided to come here for some strange reason. But today I've decided this is where I'm going to be. Today I'm going to try to do the best that I can. Today I'm going to be a good father. Today I'm going to be a good grandfather. Today I'm going to be a good partner to my partner, Pat. So those are all the things that has kept me here today. But it doesn't frighten me to leave it, but I just know that the time isn't right. This will tell me different things. This will tell me how much of a failure I am. This will tell me what I need to be doing. But when I listen to my peers around me, when I listen to people around me who I know are listening to Marty Daly, it really makes a difference. That's why the mental health strategy is really important when we talk about the citizen's voice being heard. Because through Bamford, we knew that service users and carers need to be heard. They need to be part of the services. If we're going back 20 years, when we needed to be there, then they needed to be there. My rule came about in 2009 when John McEwen decided, instead of having just service users having to put it, we need to employ service users. So are we past the place of consultation? Because I used to always turn around and say, well, will service users in, tell their story, ask them what they think about this. And the big thing about consultation was they'd walk you into a service and turn around and says, what do you think of this? You turn around and say, oh, I don't really think it's a suit. Oh, too late, we've already put the money in it. Or what do you think of this room? Oh, I don't think it really, oh, too late, we've already bought that paint. You know what I mean? So consultation, we need to put this aside. Co-production, co-facilitation, co-working. That's the only way that you are going to survive. I know you got good stats there. I'll be down to top of you in a few quid or for you know what I mean? But the things may be growing, but don't lose sight of why they're growing, because you started to listen to the people who were using your service. You started to take on board. But are we really doing it to the principles of co-production and co-working? We've got now the peer workforce working within the Belfast Trust, and we'll talk a wee bit about that. But I just wanted to give you a lead up to, I still live with things, even though I'm holding down a job. I'm still using that experience to help me in my job. But I would be nowhere in my job unless every single week I was talking to my peers and people who are using that service. Never take your eye off the ball. And I hope that this mental health strategy will embed that, will enforce that, will recognize that, and we will start to grow from it. It's a 10-year strategy. I don't think we're going to be anywhere near where we need to be in 10 years. But unless we start, we're just going backwards. Okay, so I'm going to hand you over to Phil, and I'll be jumping in and out because I'm not really good at doing, because it's hard for me to read while someone else is talking in my ear. But we'll be jumping out, and I hope you'll give you another couple of minutes to actually understand what we're saying here.
Okay, so what Marty and I have done is to work our way through the journey that we've had, along with Oscar. Many people know Oscar now as one of your new trustees. Oscar's been on this journey with us in terms of working through the mental health strategy and more recently the Regional Mental Health Service. And right from day one, we've been on the journey of making sure that co-production, co-design underpins every single conversation that we have, every paper that we write, every action that we put together, and every engagement event as well, so that we don't stand up on our own. We always have some of the service user consultants, usually Marty or Brian, along with us in terms of this isn't about us telling you what it is that the mental health strategy is saying, but it's about how we together have drafted and worked up different proposals that have now been approved by the Minister. So some of the things that we've pulled together is to try and help to focus on your key theme around co-production, co-design, but also your voice. How will we ensure that the voice of all service users is involved as we move forward in terms of design and delivery? So some of the things that we've talked about is the commitment to co-production, co-design. We're going to look very briefly at actions 15 and 17, which is around the community and voluntary organisations, a recognition that many of the community and voluntary organisations across mental health in Northern Ireland, the backbone of them are people who have experience either directly or as carers with people who have got severe and enduring mental illness, particularly, sometimes more enduring and not recognised in terms of the services that are delivered. We'll touch on Action 31, which is the Regional Mental Health Service. We'll show you the structure that we have set up to try and support the systems of communication to ensure that at every single point of design or delivery or evaluations that service users' voice is very much a part of that. And then Action 33, which we have split, and I'll tell you a wee bit more about that in a minute. In the mental health strategy, it connects peer support and advocacy, but very early on in our journey, we realised that those two pieces are completely different, and we're challenged by the service user groups around why are you trying to get one action to cover both of these elements, which in their own right are really important and enormous pieces of work in terms of what needs to happen. So the vision, first of all, we've highlighted kind of like in the bolder text, what we think is really important in terms of the service user's voice. And this is the commitment to break down barriers, to make sure that individuals and their needs are very much at the centre of every conversation, every organisation's work, and that we're all in this together to ensure that people access the right service at the right time by the right people. When we look at the principles, the very first principles of the mental health strategy very much talks about meaningful and effective co-production and co-design at every stage involving all partners. Service users and carers are very much important partners at that table where everyone has got the ownership to ensure that we're moving in the right direction. The strategy also builds on the recognition that Siobhan O'Neill's post, that mental health champion, has got a very valuable part to play in terms of ensuring that we're going in the right direction, but also the work that she does right across the region, listening to people, listening to their stories and feeding that through the system. She also, because she sits outside of the formal structures, is able to challenge in a way that some other people inside aren't able to. But we're going to talk about later on a regional mental health service user consultant that has a different role than Siobhan because they're embedded within the decision-making processes. So full recognition that this new post, mental health champion post, is really valuable and will help us to move in the right direction. Co-production, and what do we mean by co-production and co-design? Some of the things that we have learnt on our journey throughout developing the mental health strategy and the regional mental health service is that importance of continually and consistently feedback to people. This is what you told us, and this is what we did. So when we've come to events where we've been engaging with service users and coming back 6 months later, we've always been able to say, these are the things that you told us were important to you. This is how we use that information to shape the recommendations and the actions that we needed, so that people can very clearly see that the amount of time and effort they took to help share their story, we listened to it and we actually used it to shape things moving forward. Plain English, and there was a couple of conversations earlier on about how we help people to understand in the different mediums of if it's Lego, if it's music, if it's dance, that we use communication and language in a way that people are able to understand what it is the conversation's about. Marty, a couple of decades ago in the Approved Social Work programme, came to share his story. And we were all asking questions using terminology like ASW's mental health order and Article 56. And he very quickly says, I don't know what you're talking about. So we had slipped very quickly into language that we were comfortable with, that we used in our day-to-day professional world. And it in itself was a barrier in terms of communication with people when we were wanting to try and engage with them. Co-production at every stage, and Marty explained it very well about, you come into a room and you're asked about, do you like this room after everything's been designed and the furniture's been purchased? First of all, it makes you feel that I don't have a voice. Nobody really wants to hear what it is. We've been the tokenistic approach of being asked for an opinion that isn't actually going to change. So in terms of the strategies, what we have tried to do from the very beginning is that there have been no conversations without service users and service user consultants in the room with us and their carers, to engage in that conversation right from the very beginning. And even the things in terms of trying to draw up job descriptions for the service user consultant, We started off with a blank page. We had the conversation about what's important, what do you want to see in it, what needs to happen, and then the work of getting the ink onto the page happened after that, but only after we listened to people from the very beginning about what is this post actually going to mean, what should it mean. We've also looked at the journey of some people who really want to be engaged and struggle at times to find the right words and the right way to express themselves. And they also might experience stress, as we all do when we're standing up here at times, that they cannot manage or don't want to be here, but we need to hear what it is that they have to say. So we've looked at programs in terms of building resilience and building capacity and supporting people on their journey to help them to do that. Career pathways is something that even now we continue to struggle with. And although we're saying people who start out in their journey as peer support workers should be supported as any other professional person to move through the different bands and the higher pay scales, and yet we continue to have challenges even after MROC's been in Northern Ireland for like well over a decade. There's still a lot of stigma around people within the workforce fully accepting that a service user can actually deliver the same service and better than someone with a professional education. So we're still on that journey. And we have worked within the strategy to try and build stepping stones to help people to build their confidence and their competence to do that, but to be recognised in terms of monetary payment for those jobs as well. That payment is part of the recognition, but recognition in terms of their valued members around the table having the discussions. And then finally, I think we talked about it earlier on, a few of the speakers talked about that power dynamic, and certainly Marty in terms of his presentation. That power dynamic is real, because if you're sitting there as one or two service users in a multidisciplinary forum where everybody else, the other 100 people are all doctors and nurses and social workers and professionals of this, that, whatever, you start off at the wrong balance base. So it's about how we actually change that. How do we make sure that everybody reflects in that balance base? And we use some of the theories and the approaches to enable the balance to be acknowledged, first of all, and then fully addressed. So that's our kind of like bit around co-production, co-design. Marty, I'm going to pause in case there's anything you want to add there.
No.
Okay. Recognition of the community and voluntary organisations very clearly peppered throughout the mental health strategy and the regional mental health service. And the vision talks about the community and voluntary organisation being true partners. We can't deliver mental health services within Northern Ireland without embracing what the services are that you bring to the table, the expertise that you have within your organisations, and your commitment and enthusiasm. Without that, there would be many people who were not having their mental health needs recognised or supported. Action 15 and Action 17 specifically challenge the organisations to work in a different way. So as a system, we begin to focus the way that we structure primary and community care and secondary care to ensure that community and voluntary organisations are partners within that. And then the Action 17 challenges us even further in terms of integrating communities and voluntary organisations into that whole service delivery. So the backbone of the way that we intend to deliver mental health services as we move into the future is very much in partnership, not just with service use and carers, but also community and voluntary organisations right across the system. Many of you will have seen the structures that we've pulled together, and this is after many discussions of trying to put in a diagram what we were talking about in terms of a regional mental health service, because it's not a big trust. It's not about bringing the 5 trusts together. It's about how we all work differently. And there's a regional body in the middle, which is that kind of like blue oblong shape, where there's a head of a regional mental health service, which many of you will have seen out in the recruitment processes at the moment. Hopefully that person will be appointed this side of Christmas, and they're going to lead up this group of people who will start to make the decisions in terms of regionally how we bring that consistency across all of the different organisations. But as part of that collaborative board, that yellow circle is a regional service user consultant. That's a service user who will be appointed because they have lived experience of mental health issues. They're able to come and bring not just their own story, we'll see in the next slide how they connect into different organisations to ensure that all of the different service user groups are reflected in the discussions of the Mental Health Collaborative Board. There's kind of like an amber box at the top, which is about people with lived experience. The strategy has very clearly recognised that having a couple of people on the collaborative board isn't enough. that there needs to be a connection between a group of people who represent a whole range of different mental health conditions, and that they're able to act as a support to the people who sit within the collaborative board, challenging their decision making, giving them ideas about how to do things differently and moving things forward. So we will have a forum of people with lived experience that will be supported by the Patient Client Council, but also that very important service user consultant. This wee diagram here is trying to connect across all of the different service user groups that we have. So we've talked about the people with lived experience, which was the amber bubble connected into the collaborative board, but they are going to be supported not just by the regional service user consultant, they'll also be supported and have to build connections between all of the different service user conditions groups and also the different kind of care networks. So the eating disorder care network, people who are sitting within that need to have their voice filtered through and make sure that it's heard within that collaborative board. People with a personality disorder, exactly the same. So that we want to make sure that all of those groups are connected through a network of communication and strong voice. And then finally, the peer support and advocacy. As I referred to at the beginning, one of the very initial challenges that Marty and his colleagues gave was, why have these two things been clumped together? We then brought people together in a couple of days event to try and tease through the difference between peer support and advocacy so that we could be clear in terms of the implementation plan as to how those things would be brought forward. And there's now a very clear strategy for peer support and how we intend to build that. Advocacy we have taken out, and we've challenged PHA in terms of some of the work that they're currently doing to build that model of advocacy for the region. It's less advanced than the peer support, and Marty's model of peer support is what has been used as a best example. So
I won't hold you back much longer. I mean, at the moment we're talking about peer support, but again, what that is people with lived experience now working within the service that they may have used or within that trust that they may have used, and that's beginning to grow across all the trusts. I can only talk about within Belfast. In the Belfast at the moment, we have peer support, and some jobs have just closed there, where we have peer support within our community teams, within inpatient, within personality disorder, addictions, day centres. So that is, again, that's lived experience being going back into and understanding what people may be coming through for the first time. People may what that like to talk to. And I think what's been really good about when we talk about peer support is, you know, I mean, in England where they are a wee bit more advanced, they're now talking about those lived experience practitioners, because they are practicing. It isn't just about having your story. I mean, that is one of the criteria, is that you have lived experience. But there's also skills that maybe people thought they couldn't use anymore. Skills and understanding of themselves and being able to work, because the skill isn't just working with people, the citizens here in our service. It's actually being able to work with the teams, being able to change that mindset, being able to have that strength to understand. So again, that's that begin to grow. Where we had the concern was advocacy. Peer support is employed within the trust. So you're now an employee of the trust. So are you able to have those open conversations and say, advocacy is independent, should always be independent, and should sit outside the trust, but also be part of the teams. You have an input into the teams, have a say in the teams. So advocacy will be independent, where they will have the say and whole say when they're employed by a service user to take on their case. That's the only person that they should be listening to. That's the only thing that they need to be taken on. But my concern is, because I deal with the advocacy within Belfast Trust, is lots of our contracts around service user one-to-one advocacy. But I know that our services are doing the best they can, but they're not at the best they can. So when we're talking about our 80-bed unit within Belfast, most of the time there's 84 people in it. So the other 4 people are laying on settees. When we're talking about maybe people being moved from prisons into our forensic unit, Shannon, how's that transition going to happen? What I don't see is our organisation, advocacy organisations, actually starting to put in complaints and concerns from the organisation. What they'll say is, oh, we never heard of it. But as an organisation, if you're walking around a unit or a centre or a hospital and you see something wrong, it's your right and your duty and your concern to actually be able to put those things forward. You know what I mean? And you shouldn't be worrying about, oh, we don't want to rock a boat here because of our contract. I would take the contract off someone if they weren't rocking the boat. Because that's what you're there for, that's what you're paid for, that's part of your job description. So, as I said, advocacy is really, really important now, where we're talking now about our capacity advocates, but our mental health advocates who are there now on the ground should be the voice of the service user and the ears of the service user and empowering the service user to bring it themselves. Because without that support that I had from Mind Yourself in Derry, I probably wouldn't be standing on this stage today. They give me my heart back, they give me my soul back. And that's it, what advocacy can do, that's what other peers can do. And I'm saying, don't use loss of trick by becoming complacent and think that you have this all tied up. You need to keep looking down and trying to say, can we be doing more? Are we really listening? Are we really taking on board what they're saying? Are we doing a wee bit of consultation rather than co-production? What are we actually doing? So get that all rolled together. I'd love to be working along with this to see how we can do that. All our other service user consultants would love to be doing that. And very much the regional service user consultant would be a big part of their lives that they need to be doing.
I think that's us, Anne. Thank you.
Sorry, everyone, you're back. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I would ask for Colin McMahon to come up and give me a hand in the next section, please. I think we're going to have a question and answer session here, so I'd like the guest speakers on the panel to take a seat just across the way. We're going to fire a few questions at you. They won't be too heavy, I hope. So just take a seat. You want to bring Richard in?
Yeah. Richard, are you still with us?
You're now on mute.
There we are. Hopefully you're hearing me now.
Yes, yes, we can, Richard.
All right, thank you.
In this section, as has already been said by Colin, we have a few questions for our panel. So we now hand it over to the floor. I think our first question is from Gavin.
Hi, and first I'd like just to thank all the speakers for your really inspiring stories and taking the time to share them with us today. My question is for Leona. Leona, as a mental health organisation, how can we galvanise the support of the media to enhance our clients' voice and mental health issues more generally across Northern Ireland?
Hi, I suppose in practical ways, we can make better connections with journalists, because a lot of times organisations, they send emails to journalists and they expect them just to be picked up. And in reality, journalists get 500 emails a day from all types of different people, and they, unless it's it says urgent on it, or unless it's like a life or death situation, they'll not even look at it. So there's always, when I was a journalist, I would have covered stories for people
From Jane Wright,
because I had a relationship with them. I kind of, you know, they took the time to kind of not become friends with you, but kind of get to know you a bit and build that relationship, build that trust. So whenever there was something coming up, they would know, I would know that it was good. I would know that there was something coming up. From a more kind of, I suppose, a journalistic point of view, journalists are all day long interested in human interest stories. So don't be coming at them with stats, don't be coming at them with numbers or money or all those type of things. Come at them with human interest stories, because that's what makes people connect to stories. Humans connect with other humans, and that's what journalists are all about. So things like, you know, someone who's come through, someone who's maybe had a story of adversity and has come through the other side, those are the type of stories that journalists will be interested in all day long. Or even just trying to normalize the conversation. I'm just thinking back on some of the things that we did as journalists as well. We would have done, there's a lot of guidelines. I know people just think journalists get up in the morning, they just write stories, and there's nothing really, there's no kind of logistics, or there's no kind of methods to it. We have very strict guidelines and regulations that we have to stick by with regards, particularly with regards mental health. The Samaritans have written guidelines with regards covering suicide. So MindWise, if I was in there, I'd be advising you to work alongside journalists, because it'll kill two birds with one stone. You would build in relationships with journalists there to build a kind of code of conduct. Even just around the language that is used by journalists. You know, people say things like suffering from, you know, you were talking about schizophrenia, or suffering from, and people don't suffer from things like that. I know, because I suppose I took great care in doing that stuff myself. I would always say lived with. Just even the language, it will normalize the conversation around mental health, and it will normalize and take the sting out of a lot of stuff. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Next question from Caroline Devlin, please. How are you, Caroline?
It's just one for Richard. What strategies have children in Crossfire used which have successfully enabled children and young people to have their voice heard?
Okay, thanks, Caroline. I suppose if you know, Children of Crossfire is an organisation. Our main work is in Tanzania and Ethiopia. Basically, we focus on early childhood development, and we work with local organisations on the ground to, you know, help them do what they do better, train teachers, work with the local government and stuff. So I think, you know, our approach is a reasonably holistic approach. So you know, access to better health services, early learning, nutrition, protection, safeguarding, responsive parenting and stuff. And so I would say that's the foundation of, well, early childhood education for me would be the foundation of better mental health, better education, amplifying the voice of young people. And through our program, we work at government level. I'm very successful at that, work at an institutional level, and also working at community level and parents at parent level. And all of that is about really acknowledging how important it is that children are stimulated at a very young age and have access to, you know, pre-primary education, and even earlier than that, so that children have the best opportunity to grow, develop in every way, and contribute, I suppose, in a positive way to their own lives and the lives of the local community.
Thanks, Richard. Our next question is from Kirsten Kearney.
Hello, I'm Kirsten Kearney, Client Engagement Manager at MindWise. I was loving all the conversations about co-design and co-production. It's definitely music to our ears. And just, you've seen with Anne's conversation and the corporate strategy that client engagement is really, really key to how we're trying to drive things forward at MindWise. So I suppose my conversation, really probably Martin, is for you, is just about what can we as third sector organisations do, working closely like with service user consultants to make sure that our client voice is heard. What would you recommend for us?
Well, I'll ask you first to kind of widen that out a wee bit, is to turn around and say, okay, to ensure that the clients within MindWise voices are being heard within the trust, but also about how are you empowering your service users maybe to go out as an independent service user voice? How are you, because again, I know when I got involved, it was Belfast Trust, it was North and West Trust actually, but what they had done is they helped to facilitate us as a group, knowing that that group didn't belong to them. So it's really important sometimes that when we go to, they will talk about, say, I'm just on a MindWise since I have to be in the population of it. So they will come and they'll talk about MindWise, but again, they have vast experience of other things that's happening within the mental health world. So I think how we can kind of link in is about how we can be meeting on a regular basis to ensure that that is being heard. But I'm throwing a challenge to yourselves is how are you going to help to empower your service users to be independent and maybe become their own group and be able to move on and be able to do things and bring things forward on a bigger scale? Because I think that's really important. That the thing about the service user consultant I always feel bad about is I felt once I got into my post, that our service user group did kind of fall apart and it fell to one side, and we haven't been able to grow that up again. And I think all trusts need to be growing independent service user groups. I know we have the Patient Client Council, but I still think we need those local independent service user groups to be able to grow on. And I think a challenge for MindWise is, how do you begin to do that? Having your own service user group, but also an independent service user group to help them. Because like today, I mean, you had no control over what I was going to tell you. We turn around and say about training service users to go to meetings and what they're going to say. Never hear them turn around and say about training the professionals, because some of them can't even chair a meeting. You know what I mean? They don't even know how to do it. And it's just not their skill. You know what I mean? But it's always about looking after the service user. What we turn around and say, the meeting is the least important bit. They will say what they'll say, but how do we support them before and how do we support them after? Because tonight I know I'll be sitting in the house going, did I say the right things today? Did I do it? And you know what I mean? That's when you get the calls to turn around and say, did I do okay today? I'm here. So that's when that support needs to be.
Thank you. I'll call upon Gavin Mulvena, who has a question to the panel in general.
Thanks. Thanks everyone for the presentations today. They were great. I suppose the question that I have is particularly focused to Phil and Marty. It's about the 10-year mental health strategy, and as an organisation, we fully support it. But what we want to develop is looking at it through a cross-departmental lens, so that the pressure isn't on health solely, because mental health is everyone's business. So how do you think we can move that work forward, looking at the structural things and looking at it from communities, finance, justice, and not putting all the onus on health all the time?
I'll start off, and then people can kind of chip in if that's okay. There's full recognition that the Department of Health will never meet all of the needs of people who've got mental health issues. And when we look at the holistic approach that we've talked about previously around housing, jobs, that kind of like emotional support, your community supports, all of that spreads so many different departments within the Department of Health and the Department of Justice and Department of Communities. There are internal connections to try and make some of those things happen, but I think as a community and voluntary organisation with that banner for mental health, it's about really lobbying strongly to each one of those departments. So even in terms of the impact of the Mental Capacity Act, and we can see it right across the region, how people are being disadvantaged because they can't access services because of the interface working between NIAS, the trusts and PSNI. I would see that very much as a cross-departmental influencing impact that you need to have in terms of asking the questions to the Department of Health and the Department of Justice about how are you sorting those problems? What are you doing to make this better? So your links in shouldn't just be directly into DOH, it needs to be the Department of Justice as well.
And just another thing come up there as well is, the Department of Communities. You've seen through COVID where people's mental health deteriorated, but also when we're now people being called up for their PIP assessments, being called up for a job. You've seen now through the budget yesterday, they're now talking about getting people back to work. That is beginning to have a pressure on people right away. And then we're looking at our services to discharge. So people will maybe discharge. So when Department of Communities look at that, they turn and say, oh, you must be all better now. You know what I mean? So we need to really be working better with our Department of Communities and seeing how they can help and support, because having money coming in is as important as having medicine in your cupboard. You know what I mean? Because sometimes that's the one that keeps you stable more than the tablets. And if you've got that stabilization, then that really helps your mental health. So I think there needs to be more work done with the Department of Communities.
Okay, I think that concludes our questions. There's an online question, okay? Jane, yep. So hold on, Jane. Get a microphone.
Okay, sorry. I thought I was able to shout out. Sorry, this is a question for Richard from one of our staff members who's dialing in online today, Paul. He would like to ask Richard how important forgiveness was in his recovery journey, given his childhood trauma.
Thank you. Funny, after my presentation, I realized I forgot to mention forgiveness. But I think forgiveness was extremely important in my life. It really was. And, you know, I realize there's a whole debate around there about forgiveness. And, you know, again, people struggle to forgive what's happened to them in their life. And I just want to, first of all, say that doesn't make you a bad person. And it's perfectly understandable that if you are struggling to forgive somebody or something, then that is actually okay. And you shouldn't feel any worse because you can't. I've really been blessed or lucky or whatever terms you want to put on it, that I never really felt any anger towards the British soldier that blinded me, to the point where I met him, and me and Charles are good friends now. And I suppose the benefit for me was that I hadn't to deal with all the baggage that anger would have given me, all that negative feeling, even maybe nervous feelings and stuff like that, or, you know, that feeling you get in your stomach or whatever. I didn't have all that sort of anger or felt like banging the wall or kicking the furniture. I didn't have any of that really. So I think that the fact that I forgave the soldier, you know, allowed me to just deal with the practical elements of blindness and get on with my life. I suppose really forgiveness for me provide contentment. And I've been content all my life really with the fact that I'm blind. I've been content with the fact that I was on the receiving end of a reasonably violent act. And in the sense that I forgive the person. And I suppose it's that realization that forgiveness is not about the other person. Does it justify what Charles done to me? Absolutely not. I've told Charles that. Does it make it right to blind a 10-year-old boy? No, it doesn't. But what it did do, and has done for me, has allowed me to move on in a happy, contented way. And, you know, then when I get to meet Charles, that took it to a whole new level. And I believe through meeting Charles, I experienced the fullness of forgiveness, because, you know, I never thought I would feel the way that I felt when I met Charles. It was a very uplifting experience for me. So there we are. I'll stop at that.
Thank you very much, Richard. That was a very powerful answer. That does, I think, now conclude our question session. So could I really thank our panel, Leona, Martin, Phil, and Richard for joining us today. Again, powerful stories. And Phil, thank you for your insight into how the mental health strategy is moving forward. A great word, co-production, as well as co-design. And I speak as a former Department of Health civil servant. Those are new words, but they're powerful words. Could we also put our hands together for Colin for chairing this session? Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. It was a bit nerve-wracking, but I got through it. Hope it done you proud.
Absolutely.
Well, at this stage, I think we've just one more formality. I'd like to call on Doherty to present some flowers to all of the panel of guest speakers. Sorry, of guest speakers.
Just like Richard, you're throwing the post.
That's what they all say.
Thank you.
I think that basically brings today's event to a close. Big thank you for coming along. Great to see so many people here from Banbridge to Belfast, from Derry to Downpatrick, from Ballyclare to Belfast. It's been great to see you all. I hope you've enjoyed today. I hope you've taken something positive away from today. Thank you for everyone who has been working to set today up. There's a lot of things, technical stuff goes on behind the scenes. So we want to thank the techies that have been involved as well. Round of applause, please. I should have said it's great to see Seamus here today. Seamus from Rostrevor was a former trustee. I think you were maybe a former chair as well. So glad that you dropped in to join us. Great to see you. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's us. Thank you and safe journey back home. Well done.